Hello. After studying the 10 dispositions that teachers should have, I found that I have 2 dispositions that I believe I'm currently utilizing in my classroom, as well as 2 dispositions that I believe I can continue to grow on to help make me a more successful educator. Lastly, I'm going to discuss what a professional educator looks like. So first, the first disposition I believe that I currently have is compassion. Every single day when my students walk into my classroom, they are greeted with a high five and a good morning. Although when this whole coronavirus pandemic started, they were not greeted with a high five, but they were greeted with a nice pump of hand sanitizer. And another way that I show compassion for my students is I believe that their lives in my classroom are important, but their life outside of my classroom is also important as well. So I purposely coach a sport on campus. I coach volleyball, and it's nice to be able to see my students, some of my students, outside of the classroom and into a different field of interest. So that way they know that they are valued, not simply as an academic student. For those students I'm not able to coach, I do attend their music concerts and other sport games and other activities that we have on campus. We have robotics tournaments, all sorts of fun things to be able to see students outside of campus. The next disposition I believe I currently use is having high expectations for my students. Although I do not call them high expectations, I simply call them expectations. And I actually have this conversation with my students. The reason I do not call them high expectations is because I believe that every single one of my students can reach them. So by calling them high expectations, sometimes I fear my students think that those expectations are too high, that they're unobtainable. And so all my students know that my expectations, each of them can reach it. My academic, my behavior, and my character expectations. And it's fun being able to see my students grow throughout the year with that. Next, there's 2 dispositions that I believe that I can currently improve and grow on to help me become a better educator. The first of that is reflection. Now, what's interesting is when I first started teaching, reflection was probably one of my strengths, one of the dispositions that I was the strongest in. And one way I showed that was I used to have a journal that I used to write in every single day at the end of class to reflect on how I felt as a teacher and to reflect on how my students did and how they can continue to grow. Now that I just finished my 4th year of teaching, I think that the pressures of being a teacher have kind of influenced my daily practice. Now, those struggles are things like how much time I have to teach the material. Standardized testing, all of those things kind of dictate how I teach. And so I think those pressures of getting the good test scores, making sure I cover all the content, has not allowed me to reflect as much as I think would be beneficial for my students. To go with that, another disposition I believe I can grow in is curiosity. As a history teacher, sometimes I think I focus so much on teaching the content and making sure my students know the content that I don't allow them to have the curiosity to think as historians, which is so important for critical thinking and problem solving skills. And so I think if I allowed my students to be more curious on a daily basis and harness those critical thinking skills, it would make them better historians, better students, and ultimately better thinkers. Lastly, I wanted to discuss what a professional educator looks like and why, yes, it is important for professional educators to dress appropriately, use appropriate language, conduct themselves as facilitators in the classroom. I think their mindset is just as important. So what does a professional educator look like? First, I think they should have a growth mindset. Carol Dweck had this great idea of students need to know that they can grow, that if they haven't achieved their goal yet, they can still grow as students, because that mindset is so, so important. So teachers should be using speech that reflects that encouragement to grow. Lastly, I think professional educators should surround themselves with teachers that are ultimately going to challenge them and be honest with them, so that way they can grow as educators as well. So these are the dispositions I believe that I have as a teacher, how I can grow, and also what a professional educator looks like. Thank you so much.